The High Synod of the Kaloth did not scream, for screaming was a biological inefficiency reserved for lesser species. Yet the silence that suffocated the great obsidian chamber was louder than the death of a star. It was a silence born of data, of projections so catastrophic they defied the rigid logic of the Empire's oldest algorithmic prophets. High Arbiter Vraxthal stood at the precipice of the central dais, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic torment swirling in the center of the room. A single unmoving point of light located in the dead sector, a region of space where gravity wells collapsed into chaotic nonsense and where no ship, Kaloth or otherwise, should have been able to exist. Yet there it sat, a geometric anomaly, a human vessel. The sensors bled red with impossible readings, screaming that the object was not merely present, but was exerting a gravitational dominance that rivaled the black hole it orbited. The air in the chamber tasted of ozone and recycled fear, the ventilation systems struggling to filter the pheromones of distress radiating from the hundreds of gathered counselors. They were the masters of the Orion Arm, the architects of the Dyson swarm at Theta Cygni. Yet here they were, paralyzed by a single ship that had arrived without a warp signature, simply fading into existence like a ghost in the machine. "It does not hail us." Vraxthal's voice was a subsonic rumble, vibrating the thoracic plates of every diplomat in the lower amphitheater, a sound designed to command obedience but now laced with a tremor of uncertainty. "It does not raise shields. It does not charge weapons. It simply waits." To his left, Sub-Minister Coral, a creature of slender limbs and neural augmentations, manipulated the floating streams of light that represented the Empire's tactical analysis. Coral's movements were frantic, twitching with the erratic energy of a mind processing too much information too quickly. The data streams were a cascade of errors. The human ship was not emitting thermal radiation in a way that thermodynamics allowed. It was colder than the void around it, yet the sheer density of its hull suggested a mass that should have collapsed it into a singularity. It was a paradox wrapped in a metal skin, a violation of the ultimate law of physics that the Kaloth held as sacred scripture. "High Arbiter," Coral whispered, the audio amplifiers catching the trembling wetness of his vocal cords, "the energy output is not zero. It is negative. It is drinking the background radiation of the sector. It is not a ship. It is a hole in the universe shaped like a vessel." A murmur rippled through the assembly, a tide of clicking mandibles and shifting carapaces. The implication was horrifying. The Kaloth had fought wars against kinetic bombardments, against plasma storms, against biological plagues. They understood destruction. They respected force. But this was something else. This was a negation. To build a ship that consumed the fabric of reality for fuel was not just an act of engineering, it was an act of theological defiance. The humans, those fleeting, soft-skinned bipeds from the muddy rock of Sol, were supposed to be chaotic, emotional, prone to internecine conflict. The intelligence reports from 3 cycles ago had painted them as technologically adolescent, barely mastering the Alcubierre drive. How had they leapt from primitive fission to ontological mechanics in the blink of a galactic eye? The fear in the room was not just of death, but of obsolescence. If the humans could build this, then the Kaloth's millennia of dominance were nothing more than a child playing with sticks in the shadow of a monolith. "We must strike before it wakes," General Zyler barked, his voice cutting through the philosophical dread with the blunt instrument of military necessity. He stepped forward, his heavy combat armor grinding against the polished obsidian floor, the red lights of his targeting oculars fixated on the hologram. "If it consumes radiation, we overload it. We fire the Nova cannons. We saturate that sector with enough antimatter to turn the void white. We do not wait for the predator to open its eyes." There was a seductive logic to his violence. Action felt like safety. To do something, anything, was better than standing in this suffocating silence. The counselors leaned forward, the aggressive pheromones spiking, a collective desire for violence rising like bile. They wanted to see the anomaly burn. They wanted the universe to make sense again. Vraxthal looked down at his general, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on his spinal column. To fire was to declare war on a power they did not understand. To wait was to invite a doom they could not predict. "And if it is not a predator?" The voice was quiet, melodic, and entirely out of place in the war room. It came from the shadows behind the dais where the diplomat Alara stood. She was Kaloth, but of the caste. That dealt with the xenolinguistics of the unknown, her carapace polished to a non-threatening matte gray, her posture relaxed, almost fluid. "If it is a predator," Alara continued, stepping into the light, her eyes scanning the terrified assembly with a calm that bordered on heresy, "it would have eaten us already. You project your own fear onto the unknown. You see a weapon because you are holding a hammer. Look at the geometry, General. Look at the lines. It is not designed for deflection. It is not designed for stealth. It is a monument. It is stationary because it wants to be seen. Xyler snarled, a guttural sound of dismissal. It is a threat, diplomat. It sits on our border. It violates our sovereign space. It sits in the dead sector, Alara corrected, her voice gaining a steely edge. It sits in the graveyard of stars where we send our waste and our exiles. Why there? Why position a vessel of such infinite power in a place of nothingness? She turned to the High Arbiter. Do not fire, Vraxthal. If you strike a bell of that magnitude, you may shatter the ears of God. Let me speak to them. Let me hail the void. The room hung in suspension, the tension stretched so taut it hummed in the air. Vraxthal looked from the general, vibrating with the need to destroy, to the diplomat, standing still in the face of the abyss. The Kaloth prided themselves on logic, on the cold calculus of survival. The logical move was to destroy the threat. But the data, the impossible negative energy data, suggested that threat was the wrong word. A weapon kills. This thing was rewriting the rules of the location it occupied. Open the channel, Vraxthal commanded, the words tasting like ash. But keep the Nova cannons primed. If they speak a word of war, burn the sky. The transition from the frenetic panic of the war room to the bridge of the human vessel was a sensory shock that nearly incapacitated Alara as the holographic interface connected. She expected a bridge of steel and iron, a command center bustling with soldiers, alarms, and the chaotic noise of biologicals. Instead, the visual feed revealed a space that looked more like a cathedral of light than a ship. The walls were not metal but shifting fractals of translucent energy, revealing the swirling nebulae outside as if the hull were made of glass. There were no consoles, no buttons, no weapons lockers. In the center of the room sat a single human male, seated not on a throne but on a simple cushion on the floor, seemingly meditating. He wore no uniform, no armor, only a loose-fitting tunic of white fabric. He was small, frail-looking compared to the armored bulk of the Kaloth, yet his presence filled the screen with a gravity that made the High Arbiter's knees weak. The human opened his eyes. They were not glowing with cybernetics, nor hardened by war. They were brown, soft, and infinitely tired. Greetings, the human said, his voice transmitted not through audio speakers, but directly into the auditory cortex of every Kaloth in the chamber, a telepathic imposition that bypassed language barriers entirely. It was not an intrusion, it was a gentle offering of meaning. I am Captain Aris. Welcome to the Event Horizon. The lack of titles, the lack of aggressive posturing, confused the council. Where was the demand for surrender? Where was the ultimatum? I am High Arbiter Vraxthal of the Kaloth Empire, the Arbiter boomed, trying to reclaim the dominance of the interaction. You are in violation of our territorial sovereignty. Your vessel emits readings that threaten the stability of this sector. Identify your intent or be destroyed. The threat hung in the air, impotent against the calm of the human captain. Aris smiled, a sad, knowing expression that made Vraxthal feel like a hatchling scolding a thunderstorm. We are not in your territory, Arbiter, Aris said gently. We are in the wound. The dead sector is not empty space. It is a bruise on the skin of reality, a place where the physics of this universe are unraveling. You call us a weapon. You fear our power, but you misunderstand the nature of this ship. Aris stood up, and as he did, the background behind him shifted. The view of the nebula vanished, replaced by a complex, rotating schematic of the galaxy. But it was wrong. There were dark fissures running through the spiral arms, cracks in the light where stars were simply missing. Your sensors detect negative energy because we are not consuming power, Aris explained, walking slowly through the projection. We are stitching. This ship is a needle. The dead sector is tearing open. If we were not here holding the quantum foam together with the mass of this vessel, the vacuum decay would have consumed your empire 3 days ago. The silence in the Kaloth chamber was absolute. The general's hand hovered over the firing key, trembling. Vacuum decay, the theoretical apocalypse. The end of all physics, a bubble of true vacuum expanding at T. Speed of light, erasing matter, energy, and law. You are a maintenance crew? Alara asked, her voice breathless. The concept was absurd. A ship powerful enough to intimidate an empire, solely existing to repair the universe. We are the custodians, Aris corrected. Humanity learned long ago that conquering the galaxy is a petty ambition when the galaxy itself is dying. We do not build warships to fight neighbors, we build them to fight entropy. He looked directly at Vraxthal. You threaten us with Nova cannons. Your weapons utilize antimatter. If you fire upon us, you will disrupt the anchor field. You will not destroy us, Arbiter. You will snap the thread we are holding. And then everything you know, everything you have ever built will simply cease to be. The arrogance of the Kaloth crumbled. They had spent centuries posturing, building fleets to secure resources, drawing borders on star maps, believing they were the masters of their destiny. And all the while, these humans, whom they had dismissed as primitives, were standing in the dark, holding the roof up so it wouldn't collapse on the children playing below. The sheer scale of the humiliation was only outmatched by the terror of the truth. We did not know," Vraxthel stammered, the aggressive rumble gone from his voice. "That is why I answered," Eris said. "Ignorance is not a crime until it pulls the trigger, but now you know, and now I have a request." The shift in tone was subtle, but the air in the chamber grew heavier. The request of a being who held the universe together was not something one could refuse. "The tier is widening, the event horizon is powerful, but it is old, and I am tired. We require more mass to stabilize the anchor. We require the energy output of your Dyson swarm at Theta Cygni. We need you to divert all power from your industrial worlds, from your fleets, from your cities, and beam it to us." Panic erupted in the chamber. To divert that much power would plunge the Kaloth Empire into darkness. Economies would crash. Life support on outer colonies would fail. It was a request for civilizational suicide to save a theoretical future. General Xyler slammed his fist on the console. "He lies. It is a trick to disarm us. He wants to drain us dry and then conquer the remnants." Eris did not react to the outburst. He simply gestured, and the viewscreen on the Kaloth bridge changed. It showed the edge of the dead sector. A thin purple line of crackling energy appeared in the void, a fracture. As they watched, the fracture pulsed, and a nearby asteroid, a massive rock the size of a city, drifted too close. It didn't explode. It didn't break. It simply vanished. It was deleted. The error in reality expanded by a fraction of a millimeter. "That is the truth," Eris said softly. "The ultimate law is not survival of the fittest. It is not conquest. The ultimate law is responsibility. We have the power to be God's arbiter. We could crush your empire with a thought, but we chose to be the janitors. Now you must choose. Will you be a warrior king of a graveyard, or will you stand with us in the dark?" The philosophical weight of the moment crushed the Kaloth hierarchy. For 10,000 years they had worshipped strength. Now they saw that true strength was not the ability to inflict violence, but the capacity to endure sacrifice. Vraxthel looked at his people. He saw the fear, but he also saw the realization dawning in Alara's eyes. This was the test. This was the great filter. "General," Vraxthel said, his voice steady, resonating with a new kind of authority. "Stand down the fleets." "Arbiter, you cannot." "Stand down," Vraxthel roared, the sound echoing off the obsidian walls. "Divert power from the core worlds, shut down the manufacturing rings, darken the cities. If we burn together, but we will not let the universe die because we were too afraid to be brave." He turned back to the screen, to the small human in the white tunic. "Captain Aris, we are transmitting the coordinates. Take what you need." On the screen, Aris bowed his head. It was a gesture of profound respect. "The energy is received. The anchor is stabilizing." As the lights in the Kaloth chamber dimmed, as the power drained away to feed the human ship, the council sat in the darkness. But it was not the darkness of defeat. The viewscreen remained active, showing the purple fissure in the dead sector slowly, painfully stitching itself shut, sealed by the blinding white light of the event horizon, fueled by the sacrifice of the Kaloth Empire. In the dim light, Alara watched the human captain. She realized then the true nature of the ultimate warship. It was not a destroyer. It was a bridge. And humanity, terrifying, understated humanity, had just taught the galaxy that the only way to win the ultimate war was to refuse to fight it, and instead to save the battlefield itself. The Kaloth had sought to be the ultimate law for seeing order through power. The humans had shown them that the ultimate law was service. And in the silence of the powered-down empire, for the first time in their history, the Kaloth felt not fear but peace. The twist was not a weapon. The twist was that they were never alone in the dark. They just hadn't been looking at the light. The transmission cut, leaving only the stars, stable and burning, a testament to the silent guardians who asked for nothing but the energy to keep the sky from falling.